Now, 2005, you came out with Through the Fire, and that felt like a lot like what you were doing with And1 Mixtape Tour, but you decided to focus on Sebastian. Walk us through that process, and you got to tell me. I felt like I watched it again last night just to prepare for this conversation. Wow. I felt like you must have shot hours, I mean, months of footage with Sebastian. Walk us through that process.
We did, and Alistair Christopher, who I mentioned before from the at-risk youth group, he basically, he's from Brooklyn. He basically was there every day, and
Coney Island's not close, so he had to go. Even if he's at one part, that's not close.
And he was actually living in Staten Island at the time, and he would get on the ferry and get on the subway and get out to. But we were shooting with those days. We had the little. What were they called? Like that? Well, the PD-150, the Sony PD-150, and then the Panasonic HVX 200. I think we upgraded to in the middle. I mean, this was like dirty cameras, but he would mic people up, and he would have two mics feeding the camera, and go shoot practice or whatever every day, and then. I would go out and we would, go home with Sebastian or do whatever else we were doing a few days a week. But he was the one who was really out there every day. And there's that sequence of the film in Greece, just to shout out Alistair G-Lock, as he's known, Christopher. That sequence in Greece, he did that 100% alone.
Get out of here. I was going to ask you about that.
That game where Sebastian's mic'd up in the crowd, Jamel's mic'd up in the game, and the fans are going wild. He shot that whole thing himself, no sound man, no AC, no nothing, with one little HVX 200, and he's amazing. He's like really amazing guy. But what happened with that is I got a call in 2004 in June. From the producer of the Bob Costas show on HBO. He used to have a weekly show that he would talk sports, and also they were branching out into culture. He wanted to go beyond just sports. So the producer said, I want you to do a short film for the show. It can be about anything you want, but it's got to relate to culture in a way. And I said, well, there's this kid in Coney Island named Sebastian Telfair, and he's not the next LeBron, because the air date of the show they wanted me to create the piece for was the same night that LeBron was going to be drafted with the first pick out of high school. So I said, well, wouldn't it be cool to do something not about LeBron, but about the guy they're going to be talking about next year? And we'll do a thing in, who is he? He's this kid out in Coney Island. He's unbelievable. And I had only known about Sebastian through the And1 Mixtape Tour, because one of the first seasons, may have been the first season, 50 and AO and Hot Sauce went out to Coney Island for Bro Day. Bro Day is a tournament that was held every summer out in Coney Island in honor of Bro Rodriguez, who died from gunfire out in Coney Island, and who was the best friend of Slice Morton, who was the brother of Tiny Morton, who was the coach of Lincoln. So Tiny's brother Slice had this tournament every summer, and the And1 guys knew about it. And after their New York event, they went out to, it was just coincidence that it worked out with the calendar. They went out and played in Bro Day. And the most amazing thing about that night was Sebastian. And he was, I think, just going into 10th grade, but he had this aura, and he had charisma off the charts. Like, there's no one like Jordan, but and people are going to laugh at any mention of Sebastian Telfair's name in the same sentence as Jordan. But you have to trust me, as somebody who's worked with both. like Michael is here, but Sebastian's charisma as a young man was like just a notch below there and way above LeBron at the time and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you could not take your eyes off him. And so I suggested to the HBO guys that we do a short piece on Sebastian. And so we got in touch with him, and he said, well, as long as you make it about my brother with me, because my brother is my real hero, and everybody thinks that Stefan is my hero because he's my cousin, but he's not. It's Jamel Thomas. And so we said, sure. So we went out there and shot that. I'll have a PS to that story in a minute. But so we spent 2 days shooting with Sebastian around Coney Island, not really playing any basketball, but just going around Coney Island. And that aura we had seen at Bro Day was really there, and all the characters and in I want to say like in the village of Coney Island, mm-hmm. It's really its own place, unlike the rest of Brooklyn. But the hopes that they had in Sebastian were amazing. And then what happened was, on the second day, it started raining, and the guys just dipped and didn't invite us in, and it was raining, right? So I was like, this is weird, because everyone's getting along great and this is going great. So I didn't know what was going on. And then Sebastian's dad, Otis, comes in and gets in my car where we're sitting, staying dry, just waiting, didn't know what to do. And he says, I'm very sorry we can't invite you up, but my wife, Erica, Sebastian's mom, won't allow anything to do with basketball in the home. I was like, wow, this is weird, because most families, this was like the beginning of reality TV, and you want to be on TV if you're a kid who's trying to make it in a sport. And I said, well, why doesn't she want to have anything to do with basketball? And he said, well, it's because of what happened with Jamel. I said, well, what happened with Jamel? Because I didn't know the story. Mm-hmm. I knew who Jamel Thomas was, but I didn't know the story. And the story he told me was that, Jamel had he had led the Big East in scoring at Providence. And he was predicted to be a top 15 pick. And by the people who would do that, the Mel Kipers of the college basketball world back then. And he ended up not being picked at all. And he had taken his mom the night before, or the day before the draft, to the house that he was buying for her when he was drafted. And then he didn't get drafted. And they were heartbroken as a family. And is like, sort of metaphorically, everybody turned their head and looked over at Sebastian as the hope. And I said, wow, like, this is the backstory. This is not just a short piece. This is a movie. So I said to Otis, can we talk a little more? Can you get the guys to come down? So we met in the stairwell, the pissy stairwell in the projects down by the ground floor. And Sebastian and his brother Jamel, who was very silent, he was like the strong silent type at that point in time. He did not talk. And Otis, the three of them were there. And I said, listen, this has gone great. I think if we keep shooting, we can have a movie. And they said, what do you mean a movie? I said, like you go to the theater and they turn out the lights and you watch a movie, but it's you guys. And nobody said anything. And then they both looked at Jamel. And he just nodded his head. And then we started making the movie. Dang. But the PS, the reason why Sebastian wanted it to be known that Jamel was his guy and not Stefan was because just earlier that summer, there was an incident where Sebastian was horsing around. They were on the court. I think it was actually the Bro Day court at 25th and Surf. And they were just horsing around, and Steph rolls up in his Bentley and gets out of the car and says, "You guys playing?" And they're like, "Let's go." So he and Sebastian are guarding each other, and Sebastian's wearing Timberlands and you know, it wasn't like a serious thing, but Steph was like, you know, draining long shots and started talking stuff at Bassie, and Bassie started talking stuff back and going back at him, which was like, you know, Coney Island has one top dog at a time, and it was Stefan Marbury, no question about it. But here's Bassie not backing down, and finally the game's tied, and Bassie, you know, drives at Steph, steps back, hits a jumper and to win the game, and starts barking at him. And Steph got mad and started laying into him. This is why I don't give you any money. You Telfairs think you're special. I mean, these are families that literally Jamel and Stefan slept in the same bed. They lived directly on top of each other, but between the two families, it was barely enough to keep everybody fed. They were that close. And he literally reduced Bassie to tears on the court in front of everybody. And actually they didn't speak for a few years until Bassie was drafted, and then they sort of patched things up. But there, and believe it or not, there was a guy filming the game they were playing, but he got tired and went to get a sandwich.
And he missed the shot
before Stefan showed up. And he comes back to the court, and like everyone's just upset and fighting, and he missed the whole thing. And if that had been if he had that footage, well, he probably would have made the movie, first of all. Well, we certainly would have licensed it. But yeah, it was and Jamel and I are still in touch. He's an incredible person. And Dan Turner, the oldest brother, who was Miss Erica's oldest child, sadly got COVID and passed away last summer. And wow. three weeks later, Bassie's mother did too. So that was pretty devastating. Dan was 49 and ran an after-school program out in Coney Island, and ran a tournament with little kids. And incredible loss for the community, and a loss of a good friend for me.
I have to ask you, you set up the end of the movie setting up the younger brother as if he was going to be the next, whatever happened with him.
Well, Ethan was sort of like Bassie with like that charisma, but Ethan almost didn't have to earn it like Bassie did, because like Ethan was on the cover of Bounce. You guys, I don't know if you remember Bounce magazine with Papito Garcia did.
Oh yeah.
Years ago. Like Ethan was on the cover of Bounce when he was like 11 or 10, and Ethan was like talking back to teachers in school, and first they sent him to Turkey where Jamel was playing to have Jamel straighten him out, and then he went out to school. Sent him to a Catholic school, and he was talking back to the nuns and stuff, and it was like he was sort of a product of a different environment, even though he still lived on 31st Street. And at some point, the switch got flipped for him, and he really grew up and got very mature and serious. And he went to Idaho State, and he did really well. He scored over 20 points a game 2 years in a row, and really got his stuff together. But he didn't get drafted, and he went overseas. And after Dan passed away last summer, I haven't heard about what's been going on with Ethan. But I think Ethan is going to do well, whatever he does, because these guys in this family are so smart, and they have that likability, that charm, and if they can avoid bad decisions, they can do really well. And I think, from what I've heard, Ethan was on that good path, and I think he'll be good wherever he ends up.